Well, hello everybody. Happy Sunday. Hope you all had a lovely Valentine's Day yesterday and got spoiled with roses and chocolates. Or if you didn't, at least spoiled yourself. I hope you've all had a wonderful week and having a great weekend. I'm very happy to welcome with me tonight on Aquarius Rising Africa, J.R. Sweet. The first time J.R. is a guest on Era, and he is the author of Mormon Monarch, the book Mormon Monarch, which you will find all J.R.'s details are going to be in the description area below. But I will ask him to speak more about that as well. Obviously, as a survivor of Satanic family, CIA abuse, MKUltra. But yeah, without any further ado, let's bring him on. JR, welcome to Aquarius Rising Africa.
Hello,
How
Ken.
are you?
Good. Thank you for having me today. I was running a little behind, so I apologize to everyone, but we were able to connect. And so, yeah, thank you for having me on today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think your story is so fascinating, and really no worries about being a bit late. We generally have some tech issues hovering about when we're doing these types of shows anyway. So yeah, but I'm happy you're on, and I'm very grateful to have you and that you will be sharing your testimony with us. It's very interesting. But maybe before you go ahead, maybe you can just tell the viewers where they can get hold of you, website, anything like that. Your details will be in the description area as well.
Nice. Yeah, I'm the author of a book, Mormon Monarch, Born into a Deep State. I have a copy of it here so folks can see it. And they can order that online, and that has a lot of my journaled memories in it, also an introduction and a forward by my wife, Kate. She's had to live through some of these things with me, and so her forward is in there. And you don't have to buy the book, though. You can get online, go to mormonmonarch.com if you want to read my journaled memories. Those are all the journal memories that are in this book you can find for free. I have them posted at no cost. You can just get on there and read. I feel like this information should be readily available, whether you want a book or can afford a book or not. And so if you want the book, you can buy it. You can find that through my website at lulu.com, or you can go to my website, mormonmonarch.com. So, and then I'm also on Twitter some. I'm not on Facebook anymore, but you can find me on Twitter. So,
Wonderful.
yeah.
Thank you. Well, I certainly look forward to our chat today, this evening for me. I know you guys are a few hours behind me, so
Yeah.
I always try and be aware of the time. Hello, Misty May, and hello everybody in the chat. Really good to see you all. But JR, you know, we speak to a lot of survivors on this channel as well. So your story, again, every survivor's story to me is so unique and so shocking. I think nothing quite, for me, softens the blow of hearing parents who've sold their children into the CIA, parents who have abused their children, tortured them, been party to the worst crimes against their own flesh and blood. The shock of that for me never wears thin, I'll tell you that much, or it
Yeah.
never gets less. And I know you certainly are one of these guys who's had that occur with you. You've born into a generational cult, satanic cult family, and you've had horrific things occur in your life. So maybe you want to start just at the beginning of your story, how
Yeah,
it's for you.
yeah, yeah. It's never easy to hear. I don't listen to very many survivor stories. Hardly ever do I listen to those because it's traumatic for me, and that's not easy to read through. And I don't want other people's memories getting interrupted with my own. So, yeah, but I appreciate other individuals taking the time to hear these things and gain an understanding of them. So I appreciate that. I would like to warn people the discussion we're going to have is for mature audiences. I'm sure you have your
Yeah.
own warnings, Chantel, but
Yeah,
this,
trigger warning.
yeah, and a trigger warning too. So if 18 and older, and there is going to be triggers in this conversation, and I wouldn't want to inadvertently trigger anyone. And so if you feel like you are a survivor and you're sensitive to this information, please take that seriously and let someone else watch this before you do. Let them screen it for you. Maybe you don't even watch it, but little parts of it. So I just wanted to get
Right.
that out of the way. And then I started, I've been thinking about this for a little while, and each interview is always a little different. And so, again, I appreciate you taking the time to do this, Chantel, truly. And, but I feel like a lot of people, who am I? I think that is a good question. Who am I, even? Well, I thought for a long time that I was just a normal guy who lived a pretty good life and had a great family. And unfortunately, that's not the truth of the matter. I'm a survivor of the Central Intelligence Agency's trauma based mind control program. A lot of folks refer to it as MKUltra. This is a continuation of MKUltra. They never ended the project. That's a bunch of hogwash. And the particular project, sub-project, I believe, was Project Monarch. I went through a lot of what they refer to as Monarch programming. That's a way to desensitize that information, I guess. But this is a top secret government project. They don't want people talking about it a whole lot. They don't want me talking about it. But it should be talked about. It's a really important, it's an extremely important subject. And if you can
Right.
wrap your mind around it, you can gain a better understanding of the world around us and how it's working. But I was born into a generationally incestual, satanic CIA family, essentially, that was deeply involved with the agency's trauma based mind control program. My uncle is a CIA human bioprogrammer, is how I refer to them. My grandfather was. My father worked on my programming, but that was at home more. He wasn't as deeply embedded in the CIA. Along with the CIA, my family is satanic, and they were into satanic ritual abuse, and they're hiding in the Mormon Church. The Mormon Church itself, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, a lot of Satanists hide in that church. And my family, that's where they were hiding, was in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Interesting, because one of my other guests, Jesse Roberta, who's came on right at the beginning of when the channel began, really, and we've done a couple of deep dives into the Mormon Church, and the Mormon Church is actually what forms one of the 5 pillars of the Illuminati. So it doesn't. I mean, I'm not surprised that that's where a lot of they hide. I've also interviewed Asia Rain, who's a survivor of the Mormon Church. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her story in any way. Also trafficked through the Mormon Church by her parents. Horrific stories about what goes on there.
Yeah, she's
Um,
a wonderful person. Yeah,
yeah,
I don't know all of her story. I don't listen to a whole lot of them, but Yeah, I've talked to her a little bit, and she's a very nice person, and she's been through a lot, and so yeah, I like Asia.
Lovely, yes. No, she is. She's and strong. She's very strong. Wow, you
Very
all you
strong.
survivors are incredibly strong. I mean, I always will say, I don't know how the heck you have gotten mildly intact, never
Yeah,
mind intact, to where you are right now. It truly is a miracle. So we're very blessed to speak to you. Um, but sort of going back to the Mormon Church, yes, absolutely. There's also a thing about the Mormon Church owning a lot of pig farms, um,
yeah,
and that would also go in line with I want to just use a word that is probably not going to get too triggering for the algorithms or anyone right now, but the hunting, the kids hunting, basically child hunting, and the remains are then fed to the pigs. I don't know.
mm,
That's very much what I've been told as well. The Mormon Church is party to is a lot of that.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. We used to. That was a very common way of disposing of bodies, dismembering them and feeding them to hogs. My grandfather was involved with controlling some of those hog farms in southern Idaho, and I can remember them even using smaller facilities, people who have personal hogs, for example, and them being used for that. And so they do that. They'll also use beetles. I know there's a beetle out there that'll eat the entirety of a human body, but those are more expensive than hogs. I can remember my grandfather buying some of those beetles from an individual in Moscow, Idaho. He was an entomology professor there, and it was $1,000 beetle. And so he bought 90 of the beetles at that time to do it. And yeah, it was $1,000 piece. So yeah, they do use different means of disposing of bodies, and hogs is definitely one of them. You know, it's too bad, but that's what they're doing. They get rid of the evidence. It's a terrible thing. So yeah, but me, I was raised in a satanic CIA family, and so we were involved in those things, and that was an awful thing to grow up in. But you're not allowed to remember it all at that time, Chantel. Your memories are compartmentalized through electrocution, through hypnosis, and through the trauma itself. The events are so traumatic, you don't even want to remember them. I can remember a
yeah,
time when a memory, it had been compartmentalized, but it hadn't. It something had gone wrong, and it still wanted out. And the next day, it was coming back to me what had happened the night before, and I didn't want to remember. It was such a horror to remember, and it is a horror to remember. But now that I'm older, I understand it, and it's something I have to face. But I didn't begin to really break through my amnesia until I was about 38 or 39 years old. I was older before I really began to work through it and gain an
right.
understanding of it. And that was a lot of work. And that was really shocking to work through. Very traumatic, um, very bad deal. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
you
go ahead.
started reclaiming memories in about 2017, I think,
Yeah.
from what yeah,
Yeah. 2017, I started to really remember stuff. And, um, there were things that had been trying to eke their way out over time. It it didn't just hit me all at once. It was slow. I started remembering things. For example, I'll tell you, I was working. I was a contractor, and I would build different buildings. I did a lot of remodel, and so I would remodel buildings. And there was a brewery I was building in Idaho, there in Moscow. A wonderful brewery. The owner of it is an awesome individual, but regardless, I could remember at that time being with my grandfather and sweeping and I was pulling backward with a push broom. It's called a push broom. They're the bigger, wide ones. And I was pulling debris on a floor. And my grandfather told me not to use the broom that way. It was a push broom. He didn't want me embarrassing myself in front of other individuals. I was younger at that time. He didn't want me embarrassing myself in front of the working men there because that was very important to him, image. And told me to push with it. It's a push broom. And so I was made to push with it, but it worked better pulling. I was a little confused. Well, I later discovered I couldn't remember where that memory had occurred at. And then it came back to me later that memory had occurred in Disneyland, in a facility that was being worked on underground. And my grandfather would work with the Disney company for the agency and build different facilities underground and in various places. There's a lot of tunnels under Disneyland. There's a lot more going on there than people realize. And he would work on building different facilities. And this was one of them that someone was working on. And this was a time when I was taken underground to go through programming. You'd be taken off of a ride, taken underground. And we'll talk more about that later. But so little memories like that would start eking out before I could even understand them, which was interesting. It became more and more interesting as I gained an understanding of what those things I was remembering were. Weird things always happened in my life growing up, but strange coincidences. Things would happen that would be confusing. They just seemed too coincidental, but I just got used to it. For example, everyone always knew my uncle. This was my CIA handler when I was growing up. And I'd run into people and they would always know him. Oh, well, I know your uncle, so-and-so. And that was always weird. I was picked up by a guy in Stanley one time walking along the road. He was in this beautiful little, I want to say it was a 60s Corvette, convertible, two-seater. And he just picked me up on the side of the road. And he knew my uncle. He took me to my camp. I was camping outside of a little town there in Idaho, way up in the mountains called Stanley, Idaho. If people want to look that up, that's a beautiful area. Very beautiful. It's the Tetons of Idaho. And so, but I was living up there with some friends after high school, and we were just working in town, and I'd taken a nice long hike up in the woods, and this individual picks me up, and turns out he knows my uncle, and he just lived an hour up the road in Ketchum Sun Valley area. And in Ketchum Sun Valley, there's a lot of the rich elite there. A lot of people know that area. And that's where my uncle had lived growing up a lot. They moved back and forth between the Boise area and Ketchum, Sun Valley, Haley. And so, and then there was another guy in the Yukon, out in the middle of nowhere, Chantel, out in the middle of nowhere in the Yukon of all places. This individual, I'm at a gas station and we're sitting there filling up our tank, and we were in a Jeep Cherokee, and Jeep Cherokees don't have a lot of room in them. I had my 3 kids in there, my wife and me, and this individual walks up, sticks his head in my wife's window and says, "Hey, can I get a ride?" Because he said his motorcycle had run out of gas up the road. And so there in the Yukon, there's not a lot of amenities, you would say. And so everybody helps each other out. So I was like, sure, get in, we'll make room. But it was kind of surprising to me that he'd asked me for a ride, because there were other people at the gas station who would have had more room in their car at the same time. And so, but we took him up the road, took him to his motorcycle. Well, it turned out he knew my uncle, which I found very strange. And then there were people in Moscow, Idaho, when I went to college there, that I would always be connected with, who seemed to know my uncle as well. There was a network in Moscow, Idaho, a CIA network that those university towns get a lot of CIA people. A lot of CIA people retire and they go work at universities, and Moscow, Idaho is no exception. And so there's a network there in Moscow, and I was connected to that network because of who I was and who I was raised with. There were all kinds of weird things that were always happening. At the university, when I studied there, there was a guy outside my studio window. I studied landscape architecture. I love it. It's a beautiful field. And I had a window seat. My desk was right by the window, and I could look out the window and I could see the grounds, and they were beautiful and inspiring. But there was always this individual who would come and stand outside my window, and he was wearing all black. It was very strange. All black, black button-up shirt, black shoe. Well, they were boots, very well polished, black slacks, black coat, and he would always stand there and smoke cigarettes and look at me through the window. And I was always like, that is so weird. Why does this guy come and do this every day? And so that was another strange occurrence. Another strange occurrence was people talking about me. I'd get folks talking about me in public that I could hear them, and that would really weird me out. One time I was in Wendy's, and there were these three individuals sitting there by where you'd get drinks, and I was getting my drink, and I could hear them talking about me, talking about what I was wearing, stuff like that. They were talking about how I looked, and they seemed very interested in me, and that really weirded me out. I didn't quite even know how to take that. That was before I started to remember stuff. Well, later I would run into this individual again. There was a certain man in that group that I would later run into, and those individuals were involved in the network. And I don't want to say what I don't know. And so I know that I ran into him later during an assassination attempt on my life in Plummer, Idaho. He was there. And he was acting as what's called the spotter. And it looked like he was there with his mother and maybe the woman that had been in Wendy's with him. And that was a very scary situation because there was a gunman there, and then he was acting as the spotter. I recognized him. And that really freaked me out. I ended up working my way out of that situation because everything didn't line up for them to do it, which was a blessing to me. My daughter didn't come with us. The CIA won't kill you unless they have a 95% probability of getting it done. They don't want to make a mess and have a bunch of people asking questions. So unless they can do it, know they hit the right target and that it's going to be a successful op, they're not going to do it. And so your job as a survivor, I've talked about this a little bit before with folks, your job as a survivor is to always be trying to change those variables. So the first variable that was off in that was my daughter wasn't with us. So my family didn't line up with who we were supposed to be. And then I went out when I realized the situation was off, and I armed myself. Usually I'm armed, and I wanted to go to dinner and not have to worry about it. But there'd been helicopters harassing us, following us around all day. And now here we are at this restaurant, and I recognize this guy. And then there's this individual who is armed, and he had a quick draw pistol on, and he was a biker of some kind. Ace of Spades was on his jacket. And that was a bad deal. They ended up not getting me. I just tried to stay calm. And at one point, I had to walk past the spotter because they were over by the bathroom. And I heard the woman with him say, "Is that the guy?" I heard him say it. And I couldn't hear what he said. He mumbled something. And it seemed like they couldn't confirm that I was even the guy that they were after for some reason. And so it didn't end up going down, which was a blessing. But I'd seen those people at Wendy's before I started to remember stuff. And then I would even be triggered once in a while by my college professors because the professors, they get involved with those networks. They're involved with bad things sometimes. And so they'll be involved, and I was triggered sometimes by my own professors, and there were weird things that went on there. So there was always weird things going on in my life that I couldn't understand because I suffered from amnesia for years, and I still do to a degree. I'm still trying to work through stuff, but I also found myself working for a lot of people as a contractor. There were FBI, ex-military, Marine Corps, that were involved with the Pentagon and the Energy Department, Department of Energy, whatever it is. And I started to find that to be a real coincidence and really strange. And that bothered me. And there was something in my subconscious by the 2016, early 2017, things had begun leaking out, like the memory of my grandfather and pulling the broom. Those things had been leaking out and things were really nagging at me. And I felt like something was wrong, and my relationship with my wife started to struggle because my subconscious was just nagging the hell out of me, and things were trying to come out, but I couldn't understand it. And so I had to start to work through it. And I had to gain an understanding that something was even wrong. I can remember getting into an argument with my wife one time, and during that argument, she just looked at me and she said, "What is wrong with you?" And no one had ever asked me that before. Lovingly, especially, like, "What is wrong with you?" And generally wanting to know, like, something's wrong. You don't understand it. I don't understand it. What is going on? And those things started to really push me. And then I gained an understanding that my memory was off, that something was wrong with it. And that was through a picture. You may have heard about this before in some of your viewers, but the picture of Charlie Pride. I'd been to see Charlie Pride, this country musicianist, when I was 15 years old. That was back in 1993. And I couldn't remember it very well. I know that he'd given me an autographed picture, but in my mind, Charlie had never signed it because he'd been backstage and he wasn't coming out and doing signings that day. And so my grandfather, he bought me this big picture. Oh, I should have got it out. I always forget that. But he got me this big picture of Charlie Pride, and then all the band members and Charlie were supposed to sign it. Well, in my mind, I couldn't remember Charlie signing it. I could remember these other band members signing it, but never Charlie. And so one day my wife and I, we were going through our stuff and getting things organized, cleaned up, thinking about doing a yard sale. And I said to my wife, I said, "Well, gee, it's too bad Charlie never signed that picture that I got of him, because maybe it would be worth something now." And my wife, she says, "No." She just kind of laughed and she said, "No, it wouldn't be worth anything." And he did sign it. It's upstairs in the attic. And I was blown away. I was like, "No, how can this even be?" Because I could not remember him signing it. And I argued with her about it for a minute. And then she said, "Well, go up there and look." And I said, "Okay, I'm going to go up there and look." And I went up there and I dug it out of the attic. And oh my, when I pulled it out, it says right on there, "To Johnny from Charlie." And that just blew me away. I mean, I was like, oh my, how could I have met this individual? He signed this thing for me and I can't remember it. And so for me, that was a real catalyst in gaining an understanding that something was wrong with my memory. And that really freaked me out. And then I was going through these subconscious naggings and I was like, oh my, what am I going to do? And my wife, she says, "Well, maybe you should go see a therapist." And I started to think about it and I was like, yeah, I think I need to go see a therapist, which is something I guess there's a taboo on that, but it's a good thing to do. If you can find a good, honest therapist, I think it helps. But my therapist, I didn't see her for very long. We'll get into that. So I went and saw a therapist, Chantel. I found this wonderful older Christian lady there in Moscow. She just worked out of her home in town, and super sweet lady. And I went in, I called her up and said, I have these things I'm trying to work through, and I'm just wondering if I could come talk to you. Now, she also did hypnotherapy. I want to make that very clear. One of my intentions was to get hypnotized to quit smoking. And so I was excited about that. We did end up doing that, but I'll tell you, it didn't work that time. It had worked before in my past. I'd done that and been hypnotized to quit smoking. And it worked like a dream, but this time it didn't work at all. But anyways, so I went and saw her, and I also felt like another reason I wanted to see her, Chantel, was because I felt like my mind had been messed with, and I was afraid hypnotism had been used on me in my past, and so I I was hoping we'd be able to link all that together and break through it somehow, but that's not how it worked out, I would say. I went and saw her that first time, and that was really interesting because it started to get interesting really fast. Just from arriving at her place, the phone started to ring. It would ring once, and then it would quit, and then it would ring again, and it'd ring two times, and then it would stop. And we're sitting there in her living room, and she would try to get up and go to the phone, and then it would just stop, and she'd sit back down, and then it would ring again two times, and she would sit back down because it had quit ringing. And this would go on to the point where when I came back to see her again later, she'd already unplugged the phone. She knew I was coming, and it was like, okay, I better just unplug the phone because I know he's coming. And this always happens. And it did. It would always, the phone would start to ring, and that made her really nervous. Well, that first time I was able to talk to her, and I told her I wanted her to hypnotize me and talk to my subconscious and walk me through the meeting of Charlie Pride, because I really wanted to know what happened there. And I thought hypnosis, we'd be able to break through whatever amnesia I was having, because I'd obviously met the man, and I wanted to know how and how that had occurred. And so she tried walking me through that through hypnosis, and nothing came back at all. I was like, oh man, after I'd left there, even after a week, it took actually several weeks, if not months, to work through that memory of meeting Charlie Pride. It took a really long time. And so the second time I went back, I said, you're not going to hypnotize me to remember anything. I don't want you to walk me through anything. All I want you to do is take me into a state of hypnosis, talk to my subconscious, and I want you to tell it it's safe to remember, and it needs to remember to be safe, because I knew there was a threat in my life. And when I left that, and then what I would do is every time I'd go see her, this went on for about 2 months, she would take me into that state. She would tell me I was safe to remember and needed to remember to be safe. Then she would bring me out, and then we would talk about what I had remembered from the week before, because I met with her every week for about 2 months, maybe 2.5. And when she would put me into that and tell my subconscious that, oh my, it was a flood of information throughout that week that would just start to come out. I would start to remember things, start to find scars. While I was going through this therapy with this wonderful woman, I had started reading through Kathy O'Brien's work, because I wanted to understand a government project that could explain to me what government projects were working with people and causing them to have amnesia, first of all, and working with the mind. And so I was reading Kathy's work, and I can remember one time in particular, I was reading Kathy's work before I went to bed, and I had read over the page that I was reading, and then I just set it down and I went to sleep. Well, the next night I went and I picked up the book again, and I didn't remember where I left off. And so I was like, well, this is all good information. I'll just start right here at the beginning of the page again. And so I read through the whole page again. Well, this was a page where Kathy described, we're talking about transformation of America.
Transformation,
like, yeah.
Crazy book.
Yeah, crazy book. Yeah, horrible. Not horribly written. The events are horrible.
Yeah, but information, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Wild.
Yeah. And so Kathy, on that page, she talked about an individual programming her with a message, using her as a message courier. And they'd taken a knife and stuck it in her chest, right in the middle of her chest, where the bones come together and the flesh is softer there. and stuck a knife in her and then twisted it. Well, I don't remember exactly how her story went. That's how my story went, though, because after I read this page about Kathy having this done to her, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. Oh my God, I could remember that being done to me. And it wasn't just that I could remember it, it came back like a slap in the face, Chantel. And I
So
took
if I can just, if you don't mind, I want to just ask you, yeah, up until this point, you've obviously never not had any full memories, but obviously something in your life is making you suspect that there's something not right with you. Your wife, obviously, your conversations with your wife, and she's literally saying, "Are you okay? I don't think you're okay." So. But what at that point? And please, carry on to where you were leading as well. But it's like you were saying you were reading Kathy O'Brien's books, etc. You had suspicions that something wasn't right. What gave you the idea that it was mind control before you fully knew, before your memories were fully, or you started remembering?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I was researching at that time more into what government projects would cause amnesia. And
Right.
we're working with the human mind. That's where I would say that's where my journey began more, was studying that. And then it led me
So
into,
more just researching. You were just actually researching. You weren't actually suspecting at this point that something had happened with you. You were just
by
researching.
that time, there were a lot of coincidences. And so also in Kathy
Right.
O'Brien's book, she talks about Charlie Pride, which really
Right.
freaked me out too, because that was the memory I couldn't remember. And that freaked my wife out. We were like, well, how could that be? And so all these things started leading me in that direction. And so
Right.
I didn't start out thinking, oh, I was used in government mind control project. There were things
Right.
nagging at me. And the more I learned, the stronger it pointed in that direction. And then I started to remember, as I'm exploring these things, all these things that are directly connected. I started to remember things about Senator Robert Byrd, which Kathy talks about, and my grandfather was well acquainted with. I started remembering things about country musicianists other than Charlie, such as Randy Travis, Doc Watson, Johnny Cash. Started remembering stuff about Billy Joel, all these different people in these different music industries. And so we'll get into all my journaled memories, all those items, but and then people in Hollywood. Yeah. And so I didn't start out that way. I was just trying to figure out what was wrong. I was even talking to my brothers and my sister, trying to figure out what is going on, because I had imagined our life, like I said, was wonderful. We'd had a wonderful life. We'd gone to Disneyland almost every year as a child from the time I was 6 up until I was 15, and raised in a wonderful little suburban home, good Mormon family. That's how I pictured it. And so I was just really confused. It was horrible to be confused like that. And when I talked to my brothers and my sister, they weren't very reassuring. My sister would tell me about things she could remember that I was like, oh my, I still get flashes of it, things she talked about, but I can't remember all of it because she was abused too. And so she started telling me about some of the abuse she was put through. And then my older brother, I talked to him, and he said he didn't want to talk about our past. He said it was horrible, and he had blocked it all out, and he didn't want to remember it. And that blew me away. I was like, oh my, how can this be? And I even argued with my brother at that time, like, what are you talking about? Our life was wonderful. But not to him. And so there's things that he needs to work through, and that's his journey. And so I pray for him
Right.
in that. And then my younger brother, not my youngest brother. So I have 3 brothers and 1 sister. one older brother, older sister. My sister's the oldest, and then my younger brother and my youngest brother. And my poor younger brother, he ended up, when I was going through all these things, starting to remember all this stuff and all this drama started occurring. I pray for him too. He ended up going into a hospital, a mental hospital for a little while, is my understanding. And he was put through trauma-based mind control programming as well. He was selected for the CIA's trauma-based mind control programming, like I was. And so we were both put through programming, but he wasn't purchased by Bird when the time came. I was, but for some reason my parents didn't sell my younger brother. And I can remember going through all that, and we'll cover that later as we talk about things more. Well, I was trying to talk more.
Sorry, I was saying I interrupted you when you were just speaking about the therapist you were seeing, and initially you were, yeah.
Did you have something we needed to cover in that?
Yeah, I was just, you were saying about Kathy O'Brien's book with the Charlie Pride, and the similarities.
So I saw that therapist for a while, and when I first saw her, Chantel, she could tell that something was wrong, and she diagnosed me with PTSD, and that was interesting. And we just talked about some of the normal memories too that I had of being abused, because I can remember being abused, being taken to the living room with my father, for example, at night, taken out of my bed, taken to the living room, being unable to breathe, terrible crushing feeling. These are the kinds of things we're talking about, which are very personal things and very horrible, but they have to be talked about. So we were talking about that kind of stuff too. And so it was good to work with her for a while. She was a nice lady, but all that stuff really started to scare her, because the more we talked, the more I told her about the project, and the more I told her about things I'd been involved with in the project, and the more harassment she faced. Because when I would show up, not only would she have to unplug the phone, but you'd get people just walking back and forth out front in front of her window. One day I showed up, and then a utility company showed up. See, the agency is really good at building a network, and they have these large networks that they control, including corporations. And utility companies they're no stranger to this. And the utility company pulled up, people jumped out, ran around the side of her house and started banging on the wall. And I said, "What's going on? Did you have a work order today? Are they supposed to be here?" And she just looked terrified, and she said, no one's supposed to be working on my house today. I don't understand what's going on. And then shortly thereafter, she told me I couldn't come back anymore and talk about the stuff I was talking about, because it was scaring her too much. Something interesting, though, Chantel, is there were other people that were telling her similar things around that same time. She told me she was hearing stories from other folks. I'm not sure exactly what she meant, whether it was just abuse or what, but she cut off ties and said she couldn't talk to me anymore. She said she'd keep all the information for court if I needed it, but she didn't want to be involved in it anymore. And so I had to quit seeing her. And so
that's where your memories started surfacing, was through these conversations with her. She was able to help you with a lot of that information. What was it like when you started retrieving your memories? I mean, this must have been a bit of a shock for you, right?
It is, but it's like if you, Chantel, were all of a sudden you remembered something from your childhood you hadn't thought about for 10 years, and it just comes back to you, and you're like, oh, I remember that, except it's not pleasant. It's like, oh my gosh, I remember that. And it would come back. Now, sometimes it's fast and sometimes it's slow. And so some of those memories right away were coming back fast, and that was brutal because you don't have time to process that. And then some of the more complicated memories, they would come back slow, and you'd get a little fiddly bit of information in your brain, flash. They call them memory flashes. And you'd get a flash of putting on a concealed weapons holster, or you'd get a flash of reading your Bible at the Boise airport, and you'd remember that. Or you'd all of a sudden remember you'd heard the prophet speak in Haley, Idaho, and then you have to work through it and gain an understanding of all those things. And so, and some of those memories, like my memory of Japan, when I was taken to Japan, that memory came out within a week, and it's a long memory, but that memory just poured out. It wanted out, and it poured out. And that was after I'd been done seeing my therapist. That was, I believe, in 2018 when I started to remember that stuff. And then people in Japan just started to die after I started to remember it. It was horrible. It seemed like they started to get rid of people because I was remembering all these things. But after I started reading Kathy's stuff, I want to tell folks I started reading this book. This is PTSD Time to Heal. And this is a good friend of mine, this book. And in that book, Kathy gives you a path to healing without going through a therapist. You search it out in your own mind. And so I started journaling really heavily for a long time. For years, I was just journaling every morning. Sometimes it was night. Sometimes I would take time off of work and be like, no, I can't come into work this week. I'm working something out and I've got to deal with this. And so I did a ton of journaling. I have binders everywhere. And that was really effective. It gives you time to work through it. And so I started journaling really heavily. And as I was journaling, I found more scars. So to circle back to that, reading that page of Kathy's, there was a scar on my chest, not just the memory of my uncle doing that programming on me. There was a scar in my chest that a couple years before I'd been looking at, going, what is this? How did I get this? Is it a zit? And I tried to pop it and was like, no, it's not a zit. And so, but my subconscious was trying to talk to me about it. And I just took my shirt off right when I read that page, and it came back to me that I'd had that done to me before. And so I looked at the scar on my own chest and was like, oh my God, I could remember it. There was a scar right where he'd done it. And then I have multiple scars all over my body. And as I journal, I find those scars, which I'd even hid from myself for years, because as a trauma-based mind slave who's been programmed, they program you with lots of layers. And some of those layers, I can't say one, some of those layers are to keep you from even understanding what happened to you, to cover up what happened on this layer. And so I'd hidden a lot of these things, even from myself. My skull was crushed in. I have this huge, my skull is all damaged and deformed right here. I've thought about shaving my head so I can show to people, but my wife said I would look terrible if I shaved my head, so I don't shave my head.
We will absolutely comply with what your wife decides is right.
And then I have scars on my wrists. That's where Bird carved me up when he purchased me for use by the CIA. They branded me with 2 dots on my left wrist, and those 2 dots represent U.S. and it's the 2 dots. And so I'm U.S. government property. And then there's a scar on my right wrist where Bird stuck a nail and he shoved it through my wrist at that time, that he branded me after he purchased me. And then there's a scar on my right thigh where they used to hit me with a stun gun. I don't know how many times I was hit with a stun gun, but from the time I was 6 years old, and older. I can remember Bird giving my father a stun gun when I was 6 down in California. And so they picked a spot on your body and they would hit you in that one spot all the time. And then they would say it was a birthmark. But it's not a birthmark. It's where they would hit me with the stun gun every time they were working on programming and abusing me. So I was going through all this stuff, remembering all this stuff, and I was learning about Kathy's stuff and the government's project, and I wanted my records from the CIA because I was remembering a lot of stuff about CIA too. And so I wrote to the CIA and said, I want my records. And it took me a long time to ever get responses out of them. But over the course of, I want to say, a couple of years, my first request, I made a mistake. And I said I wanted all records associated with my name and MKUltra, Project Monarch, or something like that. And the agency wrote back and they said, that's impossible because we don't have any records of that. Or no, they didn't say that. They said that that project had been ended at a certain time and we don't have anything, but you can find anything you want over here in this record database. And that was interesting. So I said, okay, well, let's word this differently. So I wrote them back and I said, I want all records on myself. And that's all I said. I want all records on myself. And they wrote back to me. That took several months to get a response from them. I had to write to them and say, what's going on? And so finally they got back to me and they said, our search didn't pull up any records that would affiliate you publicly with the CIA. But then it also went on to say that as far as a classified association, basically they couldn't talk about that. And in that, I should have had that paperwork out so I could read that to you. People should go to my website and they can read it because it's very specific in that letter on why I was denied information on my classified association with the agency. And it specifically cites the 1947 National Security Act and the 1949 Central Intelligence Agency Act and sections in those acts. And it states in this case, these records are protected. And so that's kind of blew me away. I was like, oh my, what do they mean in this case? This case is my case. And so these are the specific items that are protecting them from disclosing information for my case. And so that was really unnerving to get letters like that. And I went through the appeal process with them after that. And they still denied me. They said, no, we're not giving you anything. You are denied in full. And so I was denied in full on them giving me any records on myself. And so that was all disheartening. Like I said, I was trying to talk to my family about this. I'd also talk to my father as I was waking up and remembering these things. I texted him because I wanted to know the truth. The big part for me is I want the truth. And I wanted the truth, no matter how horrible it was. And there was a story in my family about a movie producer that my grandfather had met, Chantel, in Southern California, Los Angeles to be precise, at 2 a.m. out at a bus stop. And my grandfather would tell us this story when he was a child, or when we were children, I apologize. He had just come back from the war. He was a Marine in World War II, as the story goes. And he'd come back from the war and he was in LA at a bus stop at 2 a.m. and a limousine pulled up and the window rolled down and there was a famous movie producer sitting in there. He would never tell us who the movie producer was. And he went for a ride with this movie producer and this movie producer told him about all the movies he'd made. And my grandfather, of course, he recognized this movie producer because he was very well known. And he knew who he was and what he'd done in film, but he still explained it, and he talked about all the people he'd made famous, all the actors, and he told my grandfather that he could make him famous. And he said, I really like the way you look. You're a very handsome young man. That's basically what he said to him. And I want you to be my man whore. And if you'll do that, then I will make you famous. And the story goes that my grandfather told this individual, no way, I'm not going to have anything to do with that. And you need to drop me off at the bus stop again. So the story goes through my grandfather that he dropped him off and he left. But my grandpa would tell us, if I told you who that movie producer was, it would shatter your reality. It would completely shatter it. And so he would never tell us who the movie producer was. And I figured it out. It's Walt Disney is who that individual was. But I went to my father when I was starting to work through these things early in 2017 because I was looking for answers. And I texted my dad and I said, Dad, there's a question I want to ask. Can I ask you about something? And he said, yeah, you can ask me about anything, you know. And so I said, who was the movie producer from Grandpa's story? And he texted me back and he said, I don't know. I don't know who the movie producer was. And this really bothered me, Chantel, because a couple years prior, I'd been visiting him from college, from the university there. My wife and I had come down and we were visiting them in the Boise Valley. And I'd asked my father at that time, this was before I was remembering stuff. And I'd asked him, who was the movie producer from Grandpa's story? Because my grandfather had passed away. And I thought that it would be irrelevant. It wouldn't have to be a secret anymore. Well, my dad said, I know who it is, and I'm not telling you. I'm not going to tell you who it is. And it started this argument there in the house. And my dad ended up storming away, walking away, saying, I'm not telling you. And so I knew that he knew who the movie producer was. And so when I texted him, when I was searching for answers, he had lied to me. It was a direct lie. And I knew it. And I texted him back and I said, why are you lying? Why? What are you hiding? Is there still a threat? And all he texted back was, you need to call me. We need to talk. And so I didn't call him. I was like, no, you didn't just answer any questions. You just lied to me. And that makes me uncomfortable. My grandfather had also told us early in life that we couldn't trust anyone. We couldn't trust anybody, not our fathers, not our mothers, not our uncles, our aunts, not even him. And he told us that when I was young, probably around 8 or 9 or 7 or somewhere in there. I don't know exactly when, but so I couldn't trust my grandfather or my father. And I'd been told that in my youth. And I felt that way when I was being lied to. That was awful. So, and I talked to my mom. I called my mom. I did talk to her and I told her what I was remembering. By the time I really had it out with her, I was remembering a lot. And I was like, I remember all this stuff. I remember being abused. My father's a pedophile. What are you doing living with this guy? And we talked for a while. And then she said, well, I'm going to get to the bottom of it. I'll find out what's going on. I'll talk to your dad and see what's going on. And she never got to the bottom of anything. She didn't call me back about that. They actually sent the sheriff out to my house. I lived out on 11 and a half acres I owned outside Moscow, a little town called Derry outside of town at the base of the mountains. And out of nowhere, it was Sunday morning, the sheriff starts coming down our lane. We had a very long country lane. You could see him coming for a ways. And I was taking a nap on the floor in the living room. And my wife said, there's a sheriff coming down the road. All these things started to happen like this that were very unnerving. And so I got up and woke up a little and I went out there to meet him and said hi. And I said, what are you doing here? And he said, well, your family called and they said we had to come check on you. They said you are homicidal and suicidal. And I said, what? I'm what? I'm suicidal and homicidal.
Quickest way to get you to be locked up, right? That was their
Yeah.
their key to get you locked up. How crazy. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah. So he said that my parents had called and had him sent out saying, like I said, I was homicidal and suicidal. And that just kind of blew me away. And I said, why? Why would they say that? Because I hadn't said anything, to my knowledge, to my mother in our conversation that would have incited that even. I was angry. I was angry at my father. I was angry at my mother, but I wasn't suicidal or homicidal, nor am I today. And so that kind of blew me away. And then the more I thought about it, I was like, wait a minute, I live on 11 and a half acres out in the middle of nowhere, and you send one sheriff to a person's house who you say is homicidal and suicidal, and you send one guy. Even the Mormons travel in pairs. And that just blew me away. Like, right? Even the Mormons travel in pairs. Well, then I witnessed, as later, this was probably months later, I witnessed an individual who was suicidal and homicidal right inside of one of the little towns outside Moscow. And there was probably 5 or 6 police that all of a sudden out of nowhere pull up and surround this house. And this guy, like, they were going in for this guy. And it turned out he was homicidal and suicidal. And I was like, okay, man, they send one guy to my house. That's nice. Like, man, that was weird. So then the Mormons, my family's connected to the Mormon church too. So we're not just connected to the CIA. We're also connected to the Mormon church and the hierarchy of the church. And I was involved with people like Gordon B. Hinckley, Thomas S. Monson, Henry Eyring, these people that were high up in the church. Eyring is still around. He's still kicking. The other fellows, they've moved on. They're rotting right now in hell. But the Mormons, there was one night I started to realize all this was connected to Mormonism. And because I was remembering things about the church and Satanism in it and its connection to the Central Intelligence Agency. And I put a post up on Facebook. This was back when I was on Facebook and I was first starting to remember these things. And I put a post up about the connection between the Mormon church and the CIA, I believe, is what I said. I don't have that anymore, so I don't remember exactly what it said, but it talked about MKUltra, the Mormon church, and the CIA. And I remember after I posted that thinking to myself, okay, we'll see how long it takes for them to react to that. Because we were getting things like the sheriff coming out to our house. We also started harassed by military aircraft around this time. We had started getting phone calls from various places around where I grew up, Salt Lake, Anaheim, Los Angeles, some from Washington, D.C. There's an area up there in northern Idaho where there's a naval base. I forget exactly what it's called. Lots of calls from the naval base area up there. Bayview. I believe that was it, Bayview, Idaho. And so there were all these things happening. Well, within 4 hours of putting that post up, 4 hours, I was like, okay, let's see how long it takes for something to happen. Within 4 hours, I posted that. It must have been around 5 o'clock or so because they showed up about 15 minutes to 9 o'clock. It was dark out. All of a sudden, there's a car coming down the road. I was actually in bed because I was tired and I'd been working and I've been going through all these memories on this, dealing with this trauma, I realized. And so I was already in bed and my wife came and got me out of bed and she's like, there's someone coming down the driveway. What is going on? And I was like, oh my. And so I went out there and I didn't go out, actually. I went to the door, and two Mormons, I could see two individuals dressed like Mormons coming up. And I was like, oh shit, because we used to dress up like Mormons. We used to play the role of Mormons. It was easy to do because we were Mormons, but we'd show up, and when we'd left, you weren't breathing anymore. We would come in and we would get rid of families and individuals. And so I answered the door, actually, Chantel, with a handgun. And I didn't let them see it, but I was armed. And I only opened the door a little bit, and I said, what are you doing here? It's almost 9 o'clock at night. Why are you here? And they said that I had called someone and said I wanted to talk to them. And I was like, no, dude, I didn't call anyone, and I don't want to talk to you. And they said, well, we were told that we had to come out and talk to you and that you had made a call. And I was like, no. And one of the guys looked really confused. He was very confused about it all. And the other guy, he seemed like he understood a little bit more about what was going on. He kept looking over at my neighbor's house, who was off yonder. You could see it over there. He kept looking over there. And then when I made it very clear, I'm closing the door and you are leaving. Because if you're dealing with trauma-based mind slaves, you have to be very clear with your directive and your orders, even to them, when they come and they intend bad things. And so these are things people can hear and they can use in their own lives. When they come, you be very clear in your directions. I said, no, I'm closing the door and you're leaving. And he said, no, hold on, let me give you something. And he started to reach into his coat and he started to fight with something. And I was like, oh my, this is going from bad to worse. And so I just closed the door, hit the deadbolt, stepped out of the way, and just waited because I didn't know what was coming. Well, they stood there at the door for a while, and then they finally went back out to their car, sat in their car for a little while, and then they slowly left. And that was very unnerving. And the church was aware of what was going on, and they were quick to react. They watched things like Twitter. They watched things like Facebook. I've been harassed for things I posted on there before. And so I'm aware of that. And so that was unnerving, though. Now they were really after me, and they've tried to kill me several times. Like I said, they'll harass us with helicopters. When we lived in Idaho, the helicopter harassment started to really come. And it got to where there could be several in one day. And they would harass my wife at home, and they would harass me at work. And it got to where if my wife went to see my daughter at her job, a helicopter would come. When I lived in Moscow, I finally decided to sell that house and get out of Idaho, period, because the harassments got so bad there. And I rented this little apartment. It's actually right there. It was only 2 buildings away from where those 4 individuals were murdered later. And that was a horrible thing. It was right there in that area, just a couple buildings down, but it was a nice little apartment. And I could step out on my balcony and watch. And I could see the helicopters come in and actually harass my son, who lived below me over in this other neighborhood. And I could watch the helicopters come and hover over his place. And they knew it. And it was obnoxious. It got to where with my youngest daughter, to deal with it, we would tell her, it's a game, the ringwraiths are coming. And so we'd always have to hide in the trees and stuff. And it was all horrible to go through as a family and with children. There were people on the ground as well. You'd get people on your at the edge of your property. I was out in the middle of nowhere, and you'd get people at the edge of the property just hanging out, watching me with binoculars. And so I'd start watching them back, and then they would leave because they could see me watching them too. And it was all just extremely unnerving. And then the phone calls, you'd get phone calls, you tried to call them back and it would be disconnected. That was a very common theme. The phone calls would come from dead people, people involved in the church, people involved with my family, with where I grew up, with Salt Lake, Washington, D.C., just all kinds of phone calls. And then, like I was saying, they tried to kill me. They tried to kill me through a trigger once, and they tried to activate my suicide programming, because in the project, you're programmed to get rid of yourself. You are programmed to stop your own heart. Your brain will stop your own heart. And so they sent one of my old friends who was also raised in the project, and his family was a bad family, and his brother was raised in the project. And they send him into my house. I hadn't seen him for years. And he says, "Hey, I want to come see you." And I was like, okay. Like, I hadn't remembered much about him before he came to visit. They tried this pretty early on, and he came out, and we hung out for a little while, and then he left, and he triggered me before he left, and he triggered that suicide programming. The next morning I woke up and I felt horrible in my mind, like something was wrong. Something's wrong with my mind, and I want to get rid of myself. I feel like I have to kill myself. And I just said, this is crazy. Another thing too, Chantel, I want to tell you, is when I would see my therapist, I would get this voice in my head. When I would go there, I would sit down, and a voice in my back of my head would say, "You have to kill this woman. You have to get rid of her. She's not allowed to hear these things. You've got to kill her." And that blew me away. And that was something I had to work through. It was just crazy. It was like, these aren't even like, it's in my brain, but it doesn't feel like my thoughts. Like, how can this even be? I would never think this even. And so I was going through this after they'd sent my old buddy out to trigger me, and I had to take a walk. I just got up and I was like, uh-oh, something's not right. This is all wrong. And I went and took a walk, and it started to come back to me, the suicide programming that I'd been through. And there were several parts of it. There's the one where your heart will stop, and I'd worked through that one. And then there's my uncle programmed me to shoot myself with a Glock 19 if I ever talked about this stuff. And I was supposed to kill myself with a G19 if I ever remembered stuff and started talking. And the funny thing is, when I first started to remember all this stuff, I thought, I need protection. I need to go buy a handgun. And what did I go buy, Chantel? I went and I bought a Glock 19. And so I had a Glock 19, and that was the weapon he'd programmed me to kill myself with. And that was the programming that he had delivered. And so that was all really traumatic and hard to work through, but I was able to work through it and understand it. If you can understand that something's wrong and you need to work through it, you can work through it. You have to. And so I knew something was wrong and I had to work through it. And so I was able to work through that. And then they just tried to kill me with gunmen. They tried that several times. And that was nerve-wracking. That's about as nerve-wracking as it gets. There was the time in Plummer, Idaho, where that individual tried to kill me, and the spotter was there we talked about earlier, and the gunman, and that didn't work out. And when the gunman realized it didn't work out, he got really mad. And so going back to that story a little bit, after I'd walked past the spotters and they couldn't ID me 100%, I went in the bathroom and I just stood there looking in the mirror like, oh my God, those are spotters. Because part of me knew all this in my subconscious too. My grandfather, he taught me a lot. He was a life termination specialist too for the agency. And he taught me how to stay alive when people are trying to kill you. And I was using all those things as I was going through that scenario, trying to decrease their odds. You don't just go in there guns blazing or something crazy. No, you are constantly deflating the situation. And so I'd been trying to deflate the situation. I tried to act calm, as calm could be. I ate my steak dinner. That was the best steak dinner I ever ate, by the way, in Plummer, Idaho. I thought it was my last. And so I'm standing there looking in the mirror at myself going, oh my, this is so bad. Like, I'm here with my family. These people want to do this. I recognize all these things that are happening. And I just went back out and sat down and said, well, it's in your hands, God. It's in your hands, because I'm doing everything I can. And if this is going to happen, then it's going to happen. And I'll do everything I can to protect myself and my family. But part of the key to it is not to give yourself away too. I couldn't just say, guys, get up. We got to leave. We got to get out of here right now. You have to be so careful about those situations. And so I just sat back down after coming out of the restroom. Well, some things happened between that individual and the spotter. It looked like they were, making some kind of something to each other. And then that individual got up and he walked to the bathroom real slow. And I thought that's when he was going to shoot me. It was right there. But he went in the bathroom and he walked by the spotters and looked at them, and they did something. And then he went in the bathroom and I heard a sound. It sounded like somebody punching something. It sounded like he punched the not the TP dispenser, but the paper towel dispenser. Like, he was real mad, and he was in there for a little while, and then he came out finally and walked real slow, and he ended up paying his bill, and he ended up going outside, and he stood outside for probably 10 minutes, just standing there. And he'd look over at the restaurant, and then he'd just stand there. And I was like, oh my, I think he wanted to do it regardless of what the spotters said. But he ended up leaving, and we were able to get out of that situation. That was really bad. And then there was another.
So do you know, have you any idea why that was kind of called off, that attempted termination?
Yeah, all the variables.
It's interesting.
Yeah, all the variables didn't line up for them. They didn't have their 95%. Right. You got to be at that level of, we know you're the guy. Right. We know we can do this and get away with it. And those variables had been removed, and they couldn't positively ID me. Now, I would see that same spotter again. I went to Idaho one year, and I was coming back. I made it to Idaho. Those years going to Idaho back and forth, they get mixed up a little bit. I don't want to get them mixed up. We went over there. Sometimes I've been heavily harassed. And sometimes when they know I'm not really doing much of anything, times when they know I'm trying to do something in Idaho, like get information from someone or talk to someone, yeah, they come out of the woodwork pretty heavily. But I can remember coming back from Idaho, and we stopped in this city, and it was a good day's drive. So they'd been following me for a while. And I recognized him in the hotel lobby. It was the same guy that I'd seen in Wendy's and the same guy that I'd seen in Plummer at the restaurant. And he was at my hotel where I was at. And that really freaked me out. And there was this other individual in the lobby who, right when I walked in the door, I said, uh-oh, who is that? Because he wasn't acting right. He acted like he wasn't all there, like something wasn't clear in his mind. And so I don't know exactly what was going on. I let him know I saw him. When I saw him in the hotel lobby, I turned right around, looked at him right in the eyes, and let him know, I see you, and I know you're here. And then I went back to my room and I said, babe, we got to get out of here. Like, this is bad. And so that individual has come through my life, and I don't know where he is now or how much he's keeping an eye on me. But so the government reacted to my awakening, the agency, the military, the Pentagon, the church reacted, my parents, my family. It was all terrible. It's a horrid thing to realize. I didn't want to believe any of it, Chantel. It's a horrible thing to be involved with, and it's so traumatic. I mean, I hate it. I hate waking up and being like, oh my, like, this is my life. Like, how could this even be? you just don't, no one wants this on themselves, but everything has just pointed me in that direction. And the way that I've been harassed, things I've had to deal with. They followed me when I left Idaho. I ended up leaving Idaho because it was so dangerous, and they followed me across the country. They would harass me on the East Coast over there. They would harass me as I was traveling. I can remember being escorted out of a town called Warren, Pennsylvania. And I had a couple of little black SUVs come up next to my moving van and basically escort me out of town, and police. It was a police car and a couple little black SUVs, and they just escorted me right out of town. They didn't want me there. And helicopters and other police, the police are corrupt. Not all of them. I'm not saying all police are corrupt, but they have a network, and there are people in the network who are police. I've met lots of police sheriffs in my life who are corrupt. And so I was harassed also in Vermont. I've been harassed there quite a bit. And so, yeah, it's a bad deal. But for me, I wanted to gain an understanding of the truth. And when I started to figure it out, Chantel, I realized, well, this isn't just about me. This isn't just about me. So I want people to know I do not enjoy doing podcasts. Like, I would much rather get on here and talk about construction or building methods or art or music or something lighthearted and wonderful. But that I have to talk about this because this is what I went through, and this is what I was raised in. I was raised in a satanic CIA family that is involved with trauma-based mind control. My grandfather was a programmer. My uncle, Gail Pooley, is a programmer. And I name a lot of people in my book and on my website. People can find those. I don't know if you want me talking too much about that, but this is a matter of national security for us, not just for the United States, but for all nations. I was involved in Japan, and there are things the CIA did in Japan that are wrong. They are responsible for murder in Japan, and they should be held accountable for that. It's horrible. They're involved with modern slave trade. They're involved with drug trade. They're involved with human trafficking. And I'm not just telling you things that I'm like reading about in some website. No, I'm telling you about things that I remember. I can remember human trafficking and the CIA being involved with that. They do it through Disneyland. I know that. And they will have children down there that they keep them there, and they're for the project. And some of them are disposables. They have a lot of disposables in the project, people that they will use to kill in front of the other children that they want to keep programming. And I experienced that a lot of times. And that's a really bad deal. That's not a very good deal. And it involves the satanic elite. People, with all this Epstein stuff coming out, these are the kind of people I'm talking about, is the satanic elite. That's what I call them. You have the Ford family, you have the Hiltons. Those people are part of what's called the satanic elite, and they're involved with satanic ritual abuse, monarch programming of their own children, and it's horrible. And so,
right.
I've also tried really hard, Chantel. Do you have something you'd like to add? I'm sorry.
No. Please carry on. Carry on.
People should know that I have tried to talk to the authorities about this. One of the reasons I do these podcasts, one of the reasons I have a book and I have a website that's available for free for people to read and learn about this stuff, is because I have tried. I've called the FBI. The FBI, when I talked to them, they told me basically to shut up. You're done talking to us. And they hung up on me. At the end of the conversation, I said, you're hanging up on me. And they said, yeah, we're hanging up. We're done talking to you. They didn't even want to talk to me about it. And that just blew me away. I've written to President Trump several times. Every time I've written to him, I've been harassed heavily. with aircraft typically. I did get a phone call once. They would send a letter back. I haven't written to him for a while. The last time I wrote to him was last year, 2025. It was earlier in the year, I forget. But we had this airplane harass us for about an hour over our house. And that was really weird. And then we took a walk and it followed us. We had this airplane following us as we're taking a walk. And so it's all very unnerving. But I did get a call from the White House, and it was said, when I looked it up, it said it was from the executive offices of the president, I want to say, EOP. And I tried calling it back. When I saw it coming in, I was like, oh, shoot, here's a call from DC. Like, I don't know if I want to answer this, because you never know if you're going to get a tone call either. They have tone programming that they put you through with different sounds that'll trigger you. And so if you're a survivor, you don't want to just answer your phone if you don't know who it is, because it could be a tone call. And I still get those to this day, and I don't answer those. I try not. Sometimes, I don't want to talk about that. But I wrote to all the U.S. senators. Well, but anyway, I got a call from the EOP. I have to cover that just for a second. So I called it back. I didn't answer it, but I called it back. When I called it back, I got some young woman on the line who was like, who are you? No, this is not the office of the EOP. This is my phone. Like, it was all very strange. And so that blew me away. I was like, that's really weird. And then I wrote to all the senators of the union, all 100 of them. I sent them all letters talking about this stuff. And I just got harassed. I called the Utah County Sheriff's Office when it was going through all the, I believe it was the Hamlin investigating. And I talked to one of the sheriffs there and told him, like, look, my family was involved with satanic ritual abuse. We were involved with killing people and drinking their blood and all this stuff. And he, in the end, he says, well, what do you want me to do about that? What am I supposed to do with this information? And I was like, what are you talking about? You are law enforcement. I said, all right. I said, get me in contact with the FBI. I said, I don't trust anyone. I need you to put me in contact with someone I can talk to about this. Can you do that? And he said, yeah, I'll call you back. Let me make some calls. Well, he never called back. I never heard back from that guy. I wrote to the Intelligence Community Inspector General. I filled out their whistleblower form. I called their hotline several times trying to talk to them, and I did talk to them. And I ended up losing my driver's license. It got to where they wouldn't answer the phone. They wouldn't even answer when I was trying to call. And I ended up losing my driver's license all of a sudden because of an incident they said occurred in Oregon. I didn't even live in Oregon. I was like, how can I lose my driver's license? It took me a long time. It felt like a long time. And when you don't have your driver's license and you can't drive to work, it took about a week, maybe 2 weeks. I'm not sure. I'd have to look into all that. And they finally, I got through to somebody after threatening to sue the state, after dealing with all this stuff. They finally put me through to somebody who was like, oh, well, this is the help desk. And I was like, I have been trying to talk to somebody who can help me with this forever. Can you just help me with this? Within an hour, she had it resolved, and I had my driver's license back. That was a serious hassle, though. They're always just trying to do things like that. And then I tried talking to the Attorney General of the United States, Merrick Garland, when he was there. Nothing, just harassment. The U.S. Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, I wrote to them several times, all the members of it, and nothing. No one would get back to me. I also wrote, I finally got to where I was like, well, I'm just going to write to the director of the CIA and see if he knows about what's going on. I'm just going to write to him. Because what are they going to do? They've already tried to kill me. I believe by then I'd already left Idaho. And so I wrote to William Burns and nothing. I just would get harassed by aircraft. And that was just really
amazing.
Yeah.
It's actually not amazing. It's actually not amazing because it's what they do, right? It really is what they do. So it's like this constant harassment, trying to break you down, trying to stalk you, trying to manipulate you, trying to sort of get all sorts of, intimidation tactics, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's bad. And so, does your audience know what MKUltra trauma based mind control
Yeah.
project?
We our audience here is quite well versed. We kind of go in guns blazing, talk about the worst of the worst here. Yeah, most definitely.
We'll skip over that part. I was going to talk about that a little bit, but I think your
No,
audience,
absolutely. Please do. I mean, please do.
yeah,
It's
well,
all I'm saying. Yeah, we are aware of what that is and what happens. But yeah, I'd love to hear actually your take on that as well.
okay. So I was raised in it, and so I feel like it is important for survivors like myself to actually talk about it a little bit. Like, what is it even? How do we perceive it? And people can read about this on my website too. And if you're someone who's not familiar with it, go to my website, mormonmonarch.com. I have a section, a little tab at the top you can click on, and that what is MKUltra? And that'll talk about that for you as well. But it's a nightmare. It's a horrible thing. That I would say that's the word that describes it best, is a nightmare. A lot of times when I would be put into these situations, you'd be triggered into a personality from your base personality. You'd enter a room, you'd be made to stand, and then you'd be triggered deeper, and you would reach a point where it all comes back, and you just would say, oh crap, I remember now what I'm involved with. I remember what my family's involved with. And it's terror. It's sheer terror inside of you. It's a nightmare. You have a complete loss of control. They take over your mind and your body, and they push you out. It's a loss of free will. It's a stealing of free will. These SOB, yeah, they are stealing people's free will, which is unlawful. Even in God's law, this is unlawful. It's scary beyond what anyone can even imagine. And it's just horror. It's a nightmare of horror. And so I want people to understand there's no romance in it. There's no anything. It's just horror. It's awful. The key to it, from what my experience is called dissociation. They used to call it multiple personality disorder. People like me who are program multiples, or even non-program multiples, people who've just been put through trauma and have multiple personality disorder. But I was intentionally put through trauma at a very young age, as far back as I can remember. I believe it happened when I was born or before. My mother was raised in a military family. She was born on a military base, and she is a twin. Her her twin brother, he ended up in the CIA as well. And he was what I call open door CIA. We all in the family would talk about it, and we knew he was in the CIA. And then there's closed door CIA, which is what my parents and my grandfather and my uncle are involved with. And so I was raised in a family with a strong military background and abuse. And so I was abused horribly in order to cause me to dissociate. And that's where the human mind steps out. Essentially, your consciousness steps out of your body, of your mind. In my time, I don't know that I talk about this a whole lot, but in my time, I've talked to some about being dead before, because during one of my programming sessions, my heart was stopped, and I did die for a short time. I was clinically dead. And a tunnel came and took me away. And I spent a little bit of time in what I call home in that place. And through all these experiences, I believe that I can't say I know this for 100% certain, but I believe we have a body That's what I'm here in presenting to you now, is my body. My body is operated by my mind, which is a physical thing, which is what the CIA and the satanic elite and the satanic side Mormons are after, is your mind. And then there is your spirit, which resides within this body and helps use this mind as a control of the body. And then within the spirit is your soul. Your spirit is the body of your soul. And all this is inside this package.
Right.
And so when you're being put through extreme trauma, they are working on the mechanics of it. And I can't say that they're not working on the spiritual side as well, because they are sometimes manipulating your
Totally.
spirit.
But if you look at, in fact, I'm doing, for a while I've actually, but I'm planning to do in the next couple of weeks, a show on MKUltra and MK often, which is the spiritual abuse that they brought in, which was obviously the demonic side.
Oh,
The
interesting.
aliens, the entities, the demons, and whatever, so that because obviously we understand MKUltra was sort of hardcore mind control, right?
Mhm.
And then of course the MK often is when they start using witchcraft. They started using astrologers, they started using seers, fortune tellers, stuff like that, all spiritual. And of course weaponizing the kids, right? I would imagine that would be one of the big reasons that they were weaponizing the kids' gifts, like gifted kids like you, right? You were talking about, I know Jesse speaks about the expendables. I think you called the kids I can't remember, well, expendables, the ones that basically get sacrificed and unalived.
Yeah.
But then you have the hierarchy kids, of course, the bloodline kids, and the ones with the spiritual gifts. And those are the ones they will use, like yourself, to torture and to literally torture those gifts out of you guys. And that would be what they would be using for that, I would imagine. I don't know. What is your take on that?
Yeah, there's a lot of spirituality into it. It'll take me a minute to describe what I think on that matter, because one of the reasons that the CIA likes the satanic Mormons in particular, which is, I came from a satanic, incestual satanic family bloodline, is that they've been doing it for a long time to their own kids, abusing them, putting them through satanic ritual abuse, sexual abuse, incestual sexual abuse, molestation, rape, and for generations. And the more generations that it goes on, it becomes ingrained in your genes. And so someone like me, you mentioned bloodliners, I'm a bloodliner, and I come from, I don't understand how I'm related to King Henry VIII somewhere back there. My family was always very proud of that. And my family has been abusive for I don't even know how many generations. And so that makes me useful in that I come from a generationally abusive, but I also come from a satanic family. And my understanding of the satanic families, each satanic family, from what I can remember going through, like let's use, for example, killing somebody, a satanic ritual killing, blood atonement murder, which I was involved with when I was a kid. There are families that are actually involved in the killing, which was what my family specialized in, was actually the slitting of the throats. And we'd also catch the blood of that individual, because drinking that blood is a big part of that satanic ritual. And then there were other families that all played their roles, either working on containing that family while before the ritual occurs, or putting the robes on that family before they're brought in to be murdered, or the actual dismembering of the bodies and the transporting of those parts to, as we talked about before, a hog farm, so that those parts can be gotten rid of and the evidence disposed of. And so each satanic family plays a specific role in that. When we would do even killing for the CIA, we would still follow the same protocols as we used on the satanic side of Mormonism. So the CIA really likes us, the Mormons, because they're able to find us through their genealogical program. That's just my dog. She barks once in a while. So. Come here. Come here. Oh, she's going to run off. But they'll use those families for different things. And the CIA likes it because those families are so used to doing it. They've been doing it for a long time. And they'll pull from those satanic families the chosen children. And it's an honor to be in that satanic family and be chosen for that, because they're sick that way. They think it's an honor to be pulled into that. So, Bella, do you need to say hi? Yeah.
Hi, Bella.
Oh, who's that? Mm-hmm.
Hi, Bella. Say hi to us.
Let me pull her up here. Oh, yeah.
You can pick her up, let her come and let her join Daddy with her moment of fame with him. She obviously likes to be part of the conversation.
Yeah, she's a sweetie. But so they'll pull from that pool because that pool is so used to already doing it. And they'll pull from that pool because they'll raise their kids in satanic ritual abuse, in incestual sexual abuse, in trauma, so that their children will disassociate. They're trying to create within their child a strong ability to disassociate. And then those children are selected by the agency, which dissociate the strongest and whose bloodline they want. And so they do like to pull from satanic families because of those reasons, because they're used to doing evil things, including smuggling drugs, human trafficking, killing people, things like that, as well as incestual sexual abuse, incest, rape, abusing their kids so that they are disassociates, so that they're more useful and sellable in the open market, such as to the CIA. And then you have the genealogy program that the church is involved with for finding these satanic families as well. And they're after the subconscious mind, because when they get those dissociate kids that were raised in these satanic families who are used to this abuse, who are used to killing people and seeing people die, it's easy to incorporate them into the project. I was selected when I was 5 years old is when they selected me. And I was selected by Alex Houston. He came out to my grandparents' house and there was a test, and I was selected because of my ability to dissociate and because of my family bloodline and because of my grandfather's connections within the agency, Pentagon, and the White House. And so my grandfather was good friends with Byrd. They were work associates, and they worked together on the project. And they were both very, very, very bad people. And so the satanic side of it comes in very strongly. And the Satanists also work with drugs. They like drugs. They call them potions. You know, they consider that all to be part of magic. They love working with drugs, and they work with hypnosis. At that particular incident in the Mormon church where we killed an entire family, and I was made to be involved in that. That was when I was probably around 6, 7, 8, right around in there somewhere. And people there were even being hypnotized to remember to forget about it. And doing drugs. They were doing snorting coke there before we did all that. And so they're all into that. But the CIA, they're after those dissociate children because they're able to access the subconscious mind. Because when you dissociate and your conscious mind steps out, you have opened the door to the subconscious mind. And that's what the CIA is after, is your subconscious mind. And then that's where they work on their programming, instilling their programming. That's where they work on their programming, is in your subconscious mind, and building those
totally
different things. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's a
It's
little bit about MKUltra and trauma-based mind control. And then you're put through it for years. I was put through it for years. After I was selected by Alex Houston, we started going to Disneyland that next year when I was 6. And I don't know how many times I've been to Disneyland up until I was 15 years old. And you'd be put through programming there. They'd take you under the park and you'd be put through programming under the park. There's all kinds of tunnels under there. And you're just put through programming under there. You'd be taken off a ride. They'll always say, oh, the ride broke down. That's their excuse all the time. Peter Pan ride's always breaking down. And then they take the kid off. Or Alice in Wonderland, I was taken off of that ride. I can remember being taken off of that one. The Wild Toad ride. The first year we were there in 84, I was taken down under the park and made to watch basically a satanic ritual, made to watch my grandpa kill this little girl. There were all these other kids there that they were in cages and they were held under the park because, like we're saying, Disneyland traffics people and they'll traffic them for the agency. And there were all these kids under there in this dark room back in the tunnel system. And they were just kids. They were just held in these cages. And my grandpa said there was one particular one there. So my grandfather was always involved with programming at Disneyland. When I would be taken under the park, he was always there. He would meet me. And sometimes he'd be on a mission for the church. And when he was gone, my uncle, Gail Pooley, he would play that role for my grandfather. And he would be responsible for doing my human bio programming under the park. And so they were always there. It was most always my grandpa, but sometimes it was my Uncle Gail. And that particular time, I can remember my grandpa taking this little girl, and there was an altar in the room, and he said there was this certain individual that was a particular troublemaker, giving him trouble. And I was expecting him to take out some kid who must have been a teenager or something, and someone who looked like he could give him trouble. But no, he takes this little girl out of this cage, and she was just a little girl, Chantel. And he put her up on this altar, and then he slit her throat out. And the altar was designed so that the blood from this individual would go down through this trough, and it would land in a vessel. It was almost always a white vessel. They really like the contrast of white versus the red. It really shows the red from the blood, and they're really into drinking blood. I don't know how many times I was made to drink blood, human blood. They like it freshly drawn, and that stuff does give you a buzz, like everyone talks about. I think it's and dramachrome and dreamachrome, something like that. And there's that, yeah, it gives you a buzz, man. And it's also in the satanic elite, in the world of these satanic circles. It's considered the fountain of youth. By drinking human blood drawn through trauma, it adds longevity to your life, to your body, all those chemicals and hormones and stuff going through you. I'm not saying it's good. It's bad. It's really bad.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Oh, it's so tragic.
Yeah,
it's so tragic. When you're looking at these faces, when you see, it's like you identify with the child, for example. You can. It's one thing hearing about the kids. It's another thing actually seeing them or identifying with them. Right?
Yeah, it's horrible. Wow. And so he killed her right there in front of us, and then he made us all drink the blood. Me and my little brother. See, my little brother had also been selected by Alex Houston to be sponsored by the CIA for our Monarch programming. And so we were both.
Were you ever given drugs and stuff like that? Sort of like taken drugs, LSD? Were you one of those kids that was...
We were given tons of drugs growing up. Yeah, you were fed constant streams of drugs when you were being active, especially like when I was activated and used operationally. My uncle and CIA handler had this little case that he'd carry around with him, and it had all these vials in it, these little bottles, and they had these little cork tops on them, and he called them his potions. And I was familiar with them because they were my specific drugs. They were synthetically designed for me. And so he had drugs in there that could make you, this was my set anyway. ways. They probably used all these different ones with others, but they had ones they knew worked with me. And they would feed me those before I would be made to do something, or they'd give them to you to go to sleep. Boy, when they gave you one to go to sleep, you were going to sleep pretty quick, so you better get situated. And then there were some to make you mad, some to make you calm down, make you mellow. And so, yeah, we were constantly
Wow.
on drugs. And I can remember being taken to a government facility when I was a kid and being fed drugs. And yeah, drugs were always a big part of it.
Mm. There's a
Yeah.
lot of kids that speak about that.
Yeah.
But wow, look, I'm gonna say let's call it a day or a night for me. Where we're at right now, we've been going for close to 2 hours, and I'm sure you must be pretty damn exhausted as well. I
Yeah.
know these conversations cannot be easy for you as well. But we will have you back. We've already established that you're going to be doing a couple of shows with us. So I look forward to what you're going to be bringing for us in the future as well. Really, really look forward. Just the information, your knowledge, your understanding. And again, I cannot say thank you enough for putting yourself out on the line and sharing your testimony. These are never, ever, ever easy conversations to have, ever. And I understand, to share it and talk about it. As you say, you'd much rather be talking about construction and other things. But meanwhile, you're talking about probably the worst nightmare any human being could ever imagine going through and having to experience. So thank you for that. Thank you for your bravery. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for coming onto the show and sharing your story with us. We really do appreciate you.
Yeah.
And we will see you back in, I think it's 2 weeks. I think 2 weeks. But we'll keep you guys updated. JR, is there anything that you maybe want to just say before closing down? Anything in closing? Yeah, anything.
Thank you. Thank you, Chantel, for letting me talk. Thank you for the live show. I understand this is live, and so
Yeah,
I've done a whole lot of those. That's always interesting. It's good to see the information get out there. And so
yeah,
the next time we talk, we can go more in depth. And I'd like to just cover all of my journal memories that I've written out so that
yes.
people can hear me explain through memory what exactly I'm talking about. And so we'll cover that in the next discussion. And I really appreciate your audience. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and thank you, Chantel, for putting on the show. Thank you. And these are hard topics. These are really hard. They're
No,
very.
not easy.
So I'll probably spend the rest of my day just trying to work through it. And yeah, but let's talk again here in a couple weeks. So
Yeah, I look forward to that. And thank you. And enjoy the rest of your Sunday. And absolutely, I don't know what the weather's like with you, but take a breath, take a walk outside. Nature is an amazing healer.
yeah,
That is for sure.
yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
You too, Chantel. Bye.
Okay, guys and girls, thank you so much for joining us this evening, this morning, this afternoon, wherever in the beautiful world you are. Thank you. Please like, share, subscribe, share this testimony. For me, it's about supporting our survivors in their journey, in their story. There are so many people who are not speaking up. There are so many survivors out there who they just can't talk right now. And I know this because I speak to a lot of them behind the scenes. Many of them appreciate the survivors who are speaking up because you kind of give voice to those who don't have a voice yet or not quite feeling ready to use theirs. So thank you. And guys, please share this information. Like it, share it, subscribe it. Get it out there. The more we share knowledge, information, truth, the more the world wakes up. It's not an easy, I mean, the world is waking up to a nightmare right now. Let's not even talk about it. We're not even waking up from a nightmare. We're waking up to a nightmare. And that's what that's the reality we actually have to deal with. And the more of us are doing it together, the easier it becomes. So thank you. God bless you all. Take care and have a beautiful Sunday. I will see you tomorrow again with Miles Johnston, who's the organizer, owner, creator of the Basis Project. He was a first-time guest last week. We're talking about the island, the history of actually Northern Ireland, and how the British, amen, the British literally poisoned their potato crops back then, all again in a bid to gain control and power. The Irish, we know, one of the First Nation tribes, so they obviously have a lot of magic in their lineage. So there's a big reason the Irish were destroyed, or try to destroy them. Join us on Monday for that, tomorrow. Thank you so much, JR. Take good care. God bless you, everybody. I shall see you then. And in the meantime, be cool, be kind. Yes, be yogi.